Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Jeremy, how are you on this beautiful, beautiful day?
Outstanding. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for taking the time. And for me, it's a great way to get to know you, but it's also a great way for my audience to get to know you and what you're all about and the impact that you're making in the world. So my question, and I do this because it allows us to get to know you a little better. Tell us about you. Where were you born, and who impacted you even before the age of 10?
So I'm originally from the East Coast area, outside of Boston. And I've been an entrepreneur, I want to say my entire life. And I will even go so far as to say before I was 10. When I was, a kid, I remember we had our first business going around to neighbors in the neighborhood and beyond, and having the typical kids landscaping business, and that was a good fun summer start, but that didn't really kick off in terms of having real businesses until I'd say I was in high school, in terms of having multiple clients and building out a team and really starting to build real businesses from there.
Wow.
Entrepreneurship has been my entire career. My last real job, as it were, was in high school, and that was rather short-lived. I've always made my own way and supported entrepreneurs and helped them on their journey ever since then. And that's been, 25 plus years now.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's get to specifics, because you kind of gave us a quick idea, but I'm going to go deep.
Let's go deep.
So I also want to put your website out here. Is it bayareamastermind.com?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I'll put that there so people can find you as well. So tell us, man, you just opened up a can, and we're just going to look at we're gonna look inside of it and see what's in it, right? You had a business before the age of 10. Let's get into that. What started it? What kind of business was it? And who would you say guided you? Or what guided?
I don't know how much guidance came at that early, more formative age. That was one of those, those fun things we did. There were other, elementary, early school age businesses for sure. But there was all, dabbling in fun, but they also, involved selling stuff to other folks. Right. And, I look at that entrepreneurship streak, and when working with other entrepreneurs, I see a lot of what I have always seen in myself as well. And that there's sort of three pieces, right? As entrepreneurs, and this is me looking back at childhood as well, we see opportunities. Where others might just go on by, we see there's a gap in the marketplace or an opportunity. But secondly, we see a solution, or we see a way of solving a problem that maybe others might see it and complain about it, but not see a solution. We see the opportunity and the solution. But the third, and I think most important part, is that as entrepreneurs, we feel empowered to and then do something about that. So for those young, more formative times in those businesses, as I look back, we saw an opportunity, we realized a solution, and then we actually did something about that. And that streak continues through to businesses today, to all of the clients and mastermind members that I work with. It's a matter of working with what you do when you implement that solution to the problem and the opportunity that you saw.
What was that first business? What was that before 10?
Yeah, so the earliest one I remember was the landscaping business. There was also, we found golf balls, got those cleaned up after hours, and then resold those back, to folks that were out there. And what's funny is, as I've met so many more wonderful folks throughout life, you find other people did these same things in their parts of the world as kids, and they're not always the most original ideas, but they are the opportunities that present themselves.
You said we. Who's we?
Oh, this is the landscaping business was other neighborhood friends, and the golf ball business was my brother and myself.
Mm. And whose idea was it? Look, all these golf balls, we can do this. Whose idea was that? You or your brothers?
I know my brother and I for sure collected them.
Yeah.
And
Taking you back.
we put them in egg crates, and then where the idea came from to, hey, let's clean these and sell them back to the folks who lost them, I'm not entirely sure. But we gave that a good shot. And it wasn't a very long-lived venture, but it was a fun, fond childhood memory of, our earlier adventures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell me about your brother. Why go in business with your brother when you could have done it by yourself, or he could have done it by himself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, we're going way back. The details of all that are hazy, but
Get in your mind to go back.
yeah, certainly. I know thematically, I've always felt it's important to do things you enjoy doing with people you enjoy doing them with. And when you move towards entrepreneurial freedom, it gives you that optionality to do that. So even early on, I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't something that I enjoyed doing with someone I enjoy doing that with. And to this day, my brother and I are very close, and he's someone I enjoy doing things with. And if that wasn't the case, I don't think we would have done that even back then.
Yeah, for sure. So you did this early on, and you talked about in high school that you had other businesses. There has to be a person that kind of stood out for you, maybe forgotten, but at this point, if you have to go back as an outsider and look in on you, right, hover over and say, wow, I see you were talking to this person. Who would that person be that helped you even navigate to a different state?
Yeah, there were, I want to say two people or three rather influential even during those high school times.
Mhm.
One is that the head of the science department had like a computer lab area that was available, and I managed to self-advocate and get my homeroom changed to be my own space, and I could check in with him and not need to deal with the normal homeroom stuff and be getting work done, for the business. And that was, that had a level of responsibility and independence that I think, was seen and appreciated. But secondly, in a different department where I never even had classes or any of the teachers there, which I think was the business department, they knew that, I was doing my own thing. I had my own independent study for some of the day and got to, work on real world things. And when there was someone who came to the school looking for, a student to help them out in their business, they had, their first reaction was, oh, go talk to Jeremy. Now that I didn't know they knew who I was, but they sort of made this introduction, and that ended up being a really important client for me. And if it weren't for that introduction or that connection, the consulting side of the business probably would not have grown. The self-education side, the things I learned to get that work done, wouldn't have happened. And in fact, fast forward 15 almost no fast forward 20 years, and that's actually the person who ended up marrying my wife and myself, all stemming back to that connection and introduction that happened during those formative years.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And This person married you guys. Tell us why it was that came to fruition. Why did you say this is the person that we want to be married by?
Yeah, it was interesting. So the projects and work that he did was all around working with companies and finding opportunities and helping them to collaborate and connect, right? So his business was built around synergy, right? So he happened also just to have a background and was ordained in all these things.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So when we were looking at who could actually do this and who knew the two of us, we thought, here's a guy who understands union and joining and can do all this. And what I love is, he was living internationally at the time we were engaged and thinking about who would marry us. I actually flew overseas to go connect up with him and ask him in person if he'd marry us. And it was almost like proposing all over again. It was, just the question was a little different. The question was, will you marry us?
Instead of marry me, right?
Right. And it was a really funny question to ask, but also with all the same nerves and, and concerns around asking that kind of big question. And the answer was, of course, a resounding yes. Like, I'd be honored. I'd be happy to. But then what was great was, there was homework. So he turned around and said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. But like, here's some of the questionnaires and things I use with my clients that I would like, you two to go through. And so my fiance and I had this list of questions. And we each independently went through and answered these questions. And then he reviewed all this and processed it and went through it all. And then I had an individual call with both of us to discuss, the areas of overlap and the areas of opportunity and the compatibility and all this stuff. But it was very sort of corporate team building paperwork being done for, our team of two. And the good news was when we had, our follow-up call, he said, well, the good news is you guys are very, very compatible. That's great. And so, we sort of went through this, you could call it like pre-marriage counseling, but really, it was corporate, pre-meeting team building he was doing. And it was, kind of fun to go through that process, but also meaningful to have it not just be a one-off, show up at a wedding and officiate, but actually someone who had known us for a long time and, put in the work with us ahead of time, to see those blind spots, which is something I think is so important, not just in a relationship, but in a company, in a life, is to have that outside perspective that can help you to uncover blind spots, see the opportunities, and figure out what to do, with those situations.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And the fact that you went seeking him out, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
What was your fiance's experience when you even mentioned that this is what you were going to do? You were going to go seek this person out.
Tell me more about what you mean.
What was her reaction? But you said he knew her too?
Yeah. So we all knew each other. So, our officiant knew us, my wife and I, while we were dating, and then had moved overseas, and we had a good relationship with him. So, when we asked, he was delighted, and my wife was thrilled that, this is the person we would, be asking as well. So, we can't think of someone better to really understand, who we are and what that relationship is like. And in fact, just this summer we went and as a family, had a chance to visit him as well. And for, our kids to meet him and see, here's this, important person in our life who lives all the way around the world. And, get a chance to know him as well. And so he's seen us through, the dating part of our life, the engagement, the early years of marriage, the, parenting, part of our life, and, all those phases. And it's been wonderful to have, sort of those people in our life who are constant along the journey.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's very apparent to me the way you talk. You have such a great business mind, because
Thank you.
You didn't just say it's like a marriage encounter, a counselor, somebody who's making sure we're compatible. You took it further, and you said it's like corporate. It was them making sure that this merger and acquisitions was going to be correct. That we had all of our employees on this side, employees over here, that were going to merge. That it was going to be a great union. And it's interesting how you turned it into like a business venture, but marriage is not that, right? But marriage should be that as well. I believe in what you said, that these two are coming together, but do they really mesh? And if that was done more often in the real world, I always say, wouldn't it be easier to divorce easily, but marry hard?
Well, going back to business, I mean, that's the idea of hire slow, fire fast, right?
But when you fire, make sure you have all your ducks in a row too.
Right.
So you don't get in trouble. So talk to me about the business that you did in high school.
Yeah. So originally there was like a computer consulting business, and so we'd work with clients on development, websites, and that eventually morphed into a new business that kicked off during university time, which was actually a hardware business. And they were sort of pursuing these two separate businesses at the same time. And both of those were serving entrepreneurs, founders, and business owners, right? And I faced this critical decision point during the early time during university, and that was: do I continue pursuing my growing business and put university on hold? Do I pause the business? How do I balance both of these things out? And so the difficult decision I made, being the son of two educators, was to put school on hold. And that wasn't a great conversation to have. Both my parents had multiple degrees. School was very important to them. My mother was a teacher her entire career. My dad had been a university professor and worked at university. Like, these were educators and people who very much, believed in education. And here I was saying, I'm going to go ahead and put my education on hold to pursue, this business that's growing. And my initial thought was this was just a bump in business, right? This was a short-lived thing. It'll just be a semester and then I'll come on back. And the reality is that I still haven't gone back, 25 years later now. And that's okay. Right. I still in the back of my mind sometimes say, well, maybe I'll go back. But come on, let's be honest. Here we are. I'm probably not going back anytime soon. And it's not something I need to do. It's just something that seems like it'd be nice to put a bow on. And so I pursued the business growth side of things for a short period. And what happened, and has happened every time, is that there's some sort of side business or some side idea or some connection that comes from an existing business that turns into a little small project, and that itself becomes the bigger business that eclipses the current business. And so, we find these threads in our lives and in our careers. And when I look at our mastermind members at the Bay Area Mastermind, many of them are serial entrepreneurs. And if not now, that's in the future. Because it's not a matter of creating one business you run your entire life and that's it. You pass it on to your kids. It's a matter of creating businesses, testing out ideas, seeing what works. The ones that work well, you build up and scale. Right. Ideally, you sell those businesses, right? Or it transitions into its next form. But the serial entrepreneurship is something that runs in our veins as entrepreneurs. It's not something that we typically try out and then, go back to a job. It's a life and a calling we find. And as we move to that entrepreneurial freedom, we realize that you can't get that anywhere else except through building and growing your own businesses.
Yeah. You talked about going back to college, and it would be nice to put a bow on it. But I always find that when I see a bow, I just want to unwrap it and open the gift, right? So is it really the bow? Is it what's in? You're going to unpack. But I think that you may, if you go back to college, you'll get a couple of things here and there, but not as much as you're doing with what you're doing.
Well, I'll share with you the one piece I feel I missed out on. Okay. It's not the degree or the knowledge that came from the classes or anything else. the one thing I see in my friends who did finish, the formal education that I did, quote, miss out on is the people you get to know,
Mm.
the colleagues and students you're in the trenches with for your 4+ years of formal education, who you're pulling the all-nighters with, who you're working on the projects with, who you're in the classes with, who you're living and hanging out with and socializing with, and those lifelong connections you get, and the alumni network that you're part of, where you connect with other people who've been through what you've been through, even if you didn't know them during those college years. And that alumni network and those relationships, I think, are really important.
Yeah.
And I found those in different ways. But, when you go out and launch your own businesses, rarely are you ever in a situation where you're, living and hanging out with other people like you for that period of time and getting to know them in the same way. So, yeah, I've got a great network, and I've met wonderful people from conferences, from events that, have, come through and worked with me in various ways. And those are wonderful, but it's not the same thing. So, for those who are thinking, gee, do I continue doing this college thing or not? There's a lot of upside to continuing along that formal education path. One of the most valuable things, I think, is that network that you do get.
Yeah, that's incredible, and being part of something that
Yeah.
always fall back on. I think that's
Yep.
pretty cool. So, at what point did you realize that you really are an entrepreneur, that you don't go to a job? And have you ever had a job?
Yeah, I even in, like I mentioned, during high school, was working with multiple clients, collecting checks, setting up, business bank accounts, doing all of that kind of businessy stuff. Having a bookkeeper and an accountant, even that early on in life, and understanding there are certain parts of the business that you don't have to learn and know, you can hire people for. So, the lessons learned early on about having a team and having clients and, having marketing in place and having systems and having operations and all that kind of stuff, came in relatively early on. And so that idea of that responsibility and the freedom and independence that comes with that responsibility really found me or connected with me pretty early on. I did certainly have, a job during high school as well that I tried out. And, I think it's a good experience to see what that's like, but it's someone else telling you where to be and when to be there and what to do and how to do it. And your questions or your ideas aren't always welcome, right? You're fitting into a system versus being the one to create the systems. You're fitting into a vision versus being the one to create the vision. You're following someone else's idea of the best practices versus getting a chance to, explore and create your own best practices. So I think it's good to have some of that experience, and so you can know what's not for you. But I like to say I'm professionally unemployable. I can't imagine, going back into, or starting into a world of, a corporate job or anything like that. I know tons of people, most everyone around you in life probably has a job,
Right.
and that's okay. Our world needs that, right? But entrepreneurship is definitely not for everyone. There's a lot of characteristics that I think allow entrepreneurship to be a fit, and there are a lot of things that I think are very unattractive to most, that should keep you from getting into business, and that's a good thing. It's not for everyone.
Right, right. It's interesting because the question that I have for you is, how do you give a voice as an entrepreneur to the people that work for you now? Because an entrepreneur, now you became the boss, right? It's your decisions, it's your idea, it's your baby, it's your concept. How do we give a voice? I know how I do it in my businesses, but tell us, how do we allow them to say, you know what? This is not just a job, a job, but it's more. How do we get them to
Yeah.
stay?
Well, I'll share with you a story that influenced, the way we do things for internal communication. A number of years back, I had a really cool opportunity to do a backstage tour with Disney. And if you have a chance to do this, it's a phenomenal experience. So we got to hang out, a small group of us, with one of Disney's, corporate folks, someone who'd worked on, 5 continents and for 20 plus years of Disney and all sorts of different roles, and really knew Disney inside and out. And so we were in Florida, at Disney World there, and we got to hang out, a small group of us, with this person as we went behind the attractions and got to, see under the hood of the rides and talk shop with someone who knew Disney, and be, in the backstage area where cast members were. And it was a really neat and unique experience to see sort of the other side of Disney that allows the theme parks and things to operate. But when you have an opportunity to spend that much time with someone with that much experience, it would behoove you to ask some good questions. And so we got to ask some really good questions from someone really experienced in this space. And so one of the questions we asked was almost exactly what you're talking about. We said, with a company the size of Disney, with the number of employees or cast members they have, divided physically across, a park so big, a company so big, and so on, how do you at the corporate level stay in touch with what's going on the ground and what the actual customers and visitors are looking for? And what I loved is when you get someone in this role who does these tours and things all the time, is, when you see that smile creep across their face, because, it's not a kind of question they get asked often. And so he shared with us what they do is every day, or every shift really, they have a stand-up meeting. So, if you're running the Pirates of the Caribbean ride or Space Mountain or whatever it is, that team all gets together before shift and kicks off, and they go over a few things, right? They talk about announcements of the day, birthdays, acknowledgments, celebrations, all that kind of good stuff, whatever announcements need to be made. And they go over sort of the business of the day for a stand-up meeting. But then they also ask, like, hey, like, what's going on? Anything we need to know? And so he shared with us the story that at Epcot, and Epcot's the area of the Epcot park is where we have all the different countries sort of represented. That has the big silver globe, if you've seen pictures of Disney. So there's different areas and different themed restaurants and rides that represent different countries of the world. So the guy who was over in the UK section of Epcot, raised his hands and he said, fish and chips. And so the manager's like, okay, fish and chips. What about fish and chips? And he said, people are looking for fish and chips. And the manager's like, well, yeah, like our pub sells fish and chips. Like what's going on? And he's like, no, people are looking for fish and chips to go. And we don't offer fish and chips to go. So Disney wants to hear what's going on the ground, but they also make data-based decisions, right? A company that big, you don't do things on a whim, you do it based on data. So a big thing they do in the park is, those little hash marks, you write, four vertical lines, then one diagonal, just a quick, easy way to keep track of things. They love doing this. So they said, okay, every time someone asks for fish and chips to go, just note that down. Let's do it for a week. So after a week, they had the data for here's how many times people were asking for fish and chips to go. So that justified the business decision of let's get the to-go containers and the little paper wrapper that goes in there. So that way we can offer food to go. So they justified to the higher ups the request for a new expense that they never had before of getting the basket and the paper and all that. So now they started getting requests for fish and chips to go, and they had actual sales data, right? This wasn't a forecast or an idea. It was the actual sales data. And wouldn't you know it, the forecast they had was grossly off from the reality. Because remember, when dad asks someone, can I get fish and chips to go? He's not getting it for himself.
Right.
He's getting 4 orders to go. And also, your customers don't always ask the question they have. There might be a desire or a need there, but they never ask for it. They just look and they're like, oh, there's no to go. They don't even ask. So you're losing the business that you don't even know is waiting for you there, right? So this was actually a lot more business than they ever thought they would get for people looking for fish and chips to go. But they then started getting feedback because they asked for feedback constantly from the staff that worked at the pub there, saying like, hey, our tips are going down. And they said, what do you mean your tips are going down? They said, well, people come in, they order fish and chips to go. They sit at the bar. They're waiting for their food, but they're not ordering drinks or ordering anything for here. And they're not leaving any tips because they're not getting drinks and they're not actually dining in. So our tips are going down because the bar seats are being used by people waiting for food to go. Can we please get a separate area where people can order their fish and chips and not take up the bar space? And they said, okay, fine. So they set up and again, had the data to back up, creating an outside ordering area where you could come up and order your fish and chips to go at an outside counter versus going into the bar area. So now you had people who wanted food to go that were happy. You had bartenders who were happy. So Disney also does something really important here, which we can think about how to use in our own businesses. And that is that they do surveys. They're always surveying their customers. Now, if they were to survey you during the day while you're visiting the park, what kind of feedback might you have? You're probably delighted you're in the magical place on earth. But when they do their surveys, it's actually an interesting period. It's usually about 45-ish days after your visit. Why so long after your visit? Something interesting happens between when you pay for things and you're asked for that feedback 45 days later. That's when you get that credit card statement in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize just how much this trip of a lifetime cost. For many people, it's years of savings or years of paying off credit cards to justify a trip to the Magic Kingdom, right? It's excessively expensive and a trip of a lifetime for many. So when you're asked for feedback about something that you're now out of the moment of, and you see and realize the true cost of, you get much more honest feedback. So as they asked for feedback, one thing they discovered was that people who were dining at that restaurant, the feedback has started to go down. And so they dug deeper into that, right? We asked good questions, right? As coaches, as business owners, and so on. And what they found was that the wait times that people were waiting had gone up. And so people were dissatisfied with how long they waited for their food at the UK part of Epcot. And so when they dug into it even further, what they realized was there was one kitchen now basically supporting a dine-in restaurant and a to-go restaurant. So again, there's data to back this up. They created a separate dedicated kitchen that just does the fish and chips to go. So fast forward, by the time they got this outside ordering and the secondary kitchen online and all of this, it ended up adding, I think it was an additional like $4 million in revenue of just fish and chips to an already existing business. And that came from one employee on the front line who raised his hands and said, fish and chips, right? And that's only because the company created that safe place and the opportunity for the frontline employees who are actually interacting with customers to share ideas and spitball what they could do differently out there. And they gave them that forum and they gave them that voice, but then they checked it with real data to justify the business decisions each step of the way and made small incremental improvements that led to really, really big change, all stemming from that front line. So Absolutely. How we use this in our businesses today, we have those stand-up meetings. We ask those questions. We stay in touch with the front line of what's going on, where we're actually interfacing with customers. And we make data-driven decisions based on the ideas and feedback that comes from there. And that's something that we can all do in our businesses.
And we should. You know, the other thing is that when you think about the concept that when they realized that people were sitting at the bar and they put them outside, all of a sudden they caused a commotion because people are walking by and they're like, what is that line for? All of a sudden, when they were in the bar, people didn't see a line. They didn't know, they just passed by and they walked off. But now that they see, so it's also the experience of what are they waiting?
Yeah, it's the social proof before the sale, right? It's the curiosity.
So that must have been a very interesting trip for you. How long was that trip? How long was the engagement for?
So the backstage tour, I want to say it was a half day. I believe we did. I was out there for a few days, at an event, and that was sort of an add-on thing. A few of us got together and decided to do. I would say a lot of my most impactful and best life experiences are doing something ridiculous or outrageous or crazy that others would look at and say there's no way you can do that, or how could you possibly do that? But you find a few other friends who say yes to those kinds of things, and you have some pretty incredible life experiences. So not many folks get an opportunity to do that kind of tour, which is why I encourage our listeners, if you have a chance to do that, do that. But when when those crazy opportunities come your way in life, sometimes those make for the most impactful life memories.
From my understanding, business through Disney is very impactful because they now, a long time ago, they've realized that if they show people what's going on at Disney and teach them the concepts of business, it's there's another revenue. So somebody had to say, hey, somebody wants to know what we're doing here. Why don't we charge them for it? Why don't we make
Yeah.
more money? And I'm sure that business itself has flourished because that's something that a lot of businesses should probably take advantage of. And it's an expense that you can even write off.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in Ann Arbor, I was at a different, completely unrelated event, and one of the things we got to do was hang out with the folks from Zingerman's. Zingerman started off as this deli, right? They made sandwiches. But what was interesting is as they were selling their sandwiches, they realized that one of their bigger expense categories was bread, right? Every single order needs a roll. So that spun off this bakery. So they started baking bread for themselves, but also selling bakery to consumers and selling bakery wholesale to other restaurants. And so they spun off a different business by looking at one of their largest expenses. Well, that then turned into them realizing that their other expense was every single piece of bread had some cheese on it. So they ended up spinning off, if you can believe it, their own dairy. So they had their own cheese and their own other dairy products to supply the deli with, and also sold those wholesale and sold the dairy to the bakery to use in some of the baked goods. Now you have a little triangle of incestuous businesses. And then at some point they realized that their next biggest expense down was coffee because customers would come in and buy coffee. So they spun up a coffee roaster and a coffee importer where, when I got to hang out, in the back there, they have their coffee roaster who goes to the plantations and buys the coffee and they bring it back and roast it. And they have a wonderful cafe selling coffee direct to consumers, as well as wholesale coffee to other restaurants and places, but also to their own cafe. And so they ended up with this whole network of businesses. And all these businesses were customers of each other. And so they had this one core business in the middle of it all that provided shared services. So they did marketing, they did administration, bookkeeping, sort of these things that all businesses have in common. They could centrally manage for each of these independently run business units that was run as its own company, just selling to each other as well as the public at large. And so then people started coming in and asking the question, how are you guys running these businesses? How do you do things? So they spun up Zing Train, which is a whole training company to show how they run their businesses and how they operate things and how they get engagement at all levels and so on. So it's another one of those examples, like you were just saying with Disney, where, at a certain point in your business, people ask the question, how do you run your business? And sharing how you run the business itself becomes a business.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And thank God they do those things, right? Because it's a chance for somebody who maybe doesn't have a big business, but maybe they want to expand, or somebody who's even considering leaving their job to start their entrepreneurial journey. You have been in business forever. And you also talked about that you're unemployable, just like I am. And I know a lot of friends of mine, they're unemployable. They went from being employed to it doesn't make sense to work for someone else. But yet, even as entrepreneur, we do work for other people. We work for our clients. And we have to, just like you talked about, we have to ask the questions of our clients. What's working for you? What do you think? How are we treating you as a business? Are we listening to your concerns? And I think that's a lot of where businesses fail because they don't have their ear on the ground, right? They don't have their thumb on something. And it's not to have a thumb to hold it down, but it's more to feel the pulse.
It's a finger on the pulse. Yeah, exactly.
So maybe it's not the thumb, it's the finger. So considering all these different things that you're personally doing, talk to me about your current endeavors, and why you're so passionate about it.
Yeah. Looking back, all of my businesses have always been in the service of other entrepreneurs and helping them to move towards entrepreneurial freedom. It's something that I've seen firsthand, not just in my own life, but with clients as well. And it's a beautiful thing. And when we talk about entrepreneurial freedom, it's not just the financial piece of it. That's great. And that's important. And that comes along the way as well. But entrepreneurial freedom, it's optionality, right? It's you getting to choose how you spend your time, with who, and doing what. And for many of us, that's putting the time back in the business because we love what we do, but we get to choose which clients we work with and which projects we work on, right? For others, it's giving that time back into their community. For others, it's reinvesting that time back into their family, for hobbies, for whatever it might be, right? So I think there's this broken idea that when you start a business, you need to be working 98 hours a week, 8 days a week, and like that doesn't really, that's not sustainable, right? That kind of approach to running a business leads to burnout, right? And it's also like the worst way to be spending your time. So why would you choose to take on all the risk and go out there on your own and take on ultimate responsibility for everything, and yet work the worst kind of job you can work? That math doesn't work out. So why not instead create a business that supports the life that you want to have, right? Where you can do the work you want to do that you find meaningful and impactful. So for me, it's been about that entrepreneurial freedom. And for all the clients and members and folks that I work with, it's also about helping them move forward on that journey towards entrepreneurial freedom. And sometimes that comes down to looking at the numbers in your business differently. That can come down to challenging common beliefs or typical mindsets. That can come down to peeling off the blinders and showing what's actually going on, that as an entrepreneur, we don't always get that unbiased feedback. So when I'm able to help folks out with that, then we can start moving them forward from, being self-employed, right? With the worst parts of having a job and the worst parts of having a business, and move them towards being true business owners. And so nowadays I work with a few select clients on that, but more broadly, I work with folks in our mastermind groups. And this is where entrepreneurs get together for a full day, and we get to deep dive into each member in a dedicated hot seat of what's going on in the business, what's working, what's not, and where they need help. And you can get that true unbiased feedback and peer advisory. And that's exactly what we do at the Bay Area Mastermind, is create the forum for that so that you can see what is an option. What I find is when people come into the room to test drive our mastermind and see if it's a fit for them, and if we think they're a fit for the group, they usually bring two things into the room, right? One is what I call their area of genius, or their superpower, right? There's something that you're really good at that comes easily to you that others don't know how you do so well. Right? This might be that you're amazing at marketing, or you're incredible at managing, or you're an operations wizard, or you're fantastic with systems. There's something you do really well in your business that you bring into the room that is probably a challenge for others, right? So this is something that you know. The second big thing people usually bring in, which is typically when they find me, is a big question. There's some big challenge, some block, right? Maybe you're feeling stuck in your business, or you feel like you've plateaued, right? So that category is the things that you don't know. See, when there's something you don't know, you can seek out answers. You can go look something up online. You can go find a book. You can start asking your friends and people questions. You can get a coach, right? There's something you don't know. There's something you don't know, and so you can seek out to fill that knowledge gap. And that's usually what folks bring into the room, is they lead with this thing they don't know, and they bring with them the stuff they know that they know. And that can make for really engaging conversations. But there's a third huge category of knowledge where all the opportunity is. And that's where all the big pivots come from. And that's this category of the stuff you didn't know. When you're in the room surrounded by like-minded, growth-focused individuals who are looking to level up in their business, right? And everyone's sharing what they're working on, what's working, what's not working, and so on. That's where you get the exposure to these other ideas, to new sales channels, to new marketing ideas, to new business models, to new gotchas, to new concerns, to new opportunities, right? That's where you truly get unblocked, is by hearing what others are working on.
Mm.
So when I look around the table and see when people are taking down notes, or when that big aha moment happens, right? Or when someone, the body language changes, they lean in, right? The eyes go narrow, they look up, they ask a question. All of that happens not during their own hot seat, but during everyone else's hot seat, when everyone else is sharing what's going on. Those aren't things you can ever find in a book, right? Those aren't things you know innately. Those are only the things that come up because you've chosen to put yourself in the room with the right people, where the things you didn't know are being discussed. That's where the ideas rub off on you. And that's where, like we talked about at the start of the show, that's where we see the opportunities that others don't. We see the solutions to those opportunities, and we feel empowered to do something, and we move forward and do it. That's how our members have launched entirely new businesses than the one they came into the group with, launched entirely new products, brought on entirely new sales channels, and so much more, simply by being exposed to those other ideas from like-minded individuals in a carefully curated room.
I love the concept of what you're talking about, because it helps with expansion, if you will. Because a lot of people, when they start a business, and it makes sense, you kind of like are closed-minded. You got to focus on what you have to do. But then we think we have to drive the business that way, year in, year out, year in, year out, and we're always like, oh, I have so many bills, I have so many headaches, I have so many, and they're still narrow-minded. But the minute that we get out of that darkness, that we can expand and we can say, okay, maybe it took 6 months to get this really off the ground, but we can't stay there. We have to do what you're talking about, which is, what is Joe doing? Sue looks like she's got some good ideas. Maybe I need to talk to them. So how does someone, and you call it Bay Area Mastermind, so I'm considering it's in the Bay Area. Do you guys do online stuff, or is it only for the people who live in the Bay Area?
You know, it's funny. We were historically always, only live and in person.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of value to that. But one of the things that came up from the pandemic was we, overnight shifted to a Zoom format. And we found that, it was, it's not the same experience. It's a different, with its own pros and cons experience, of running it in a virtual format. And so with the online option available, we started getting folks who found us, who were in Wisconsin, Green Bay, who were in Maryland, Bay. Didn't know we had a Bay Area there, but when I think about, Bay seasoning and, all that, yeah, there's a Bay there too. All these other Bay areas folks were finding us, or even just more generically looking for a good mastermind group of like-minded entrepreneurs, right? So when we came back to in person, we actually came back with a hybrid format. So we have folks who join us from afar virtually. We have local members who are traveling or whatever else who join us virtually. We have folks from far away who fly in from time to time and do sort of some in person, some virtually. So no, it's grown beyond just that immediate area. We just bring, a lot of that Silicon Valley, entrepreneurial minded, folks into a room as well. So for those of you not in the immediate Bay Area, that is fine. We have folks who've joined us from all over the world. And that's a good thing. That's what allows us to have that what I call cross-pollination of ideas.
Mhm. And once again, it's listening, right? Listening to what needs to be done, because a lot of people did do virtual things because of the pandemic, but then they stopped. And yet there's so much opportunity. And to go hybrid, I think that's brilliant on your part. Um, who runs your mastermind? Is it you? Do you have partners in it? What is that based on?
Yeah, so so I facilitate groups. That's something I've always loved doing. I've been in mastermind groups for a long time. I've facilitated them for 15 plus years, and really enjoy that. And it's rewarding in its own right. But like many businesses, that turns into systematizing and operationalizing how you do things. And actually being able to have other people facilitate and run meetings to our standard using our format as well. So that's been sort of an exciting next step in that growth of being able to have, it be beyond, just this guy, but be able to follow the best practices. And like anything else, we iterate on that. And, earlier on, Sifu, you were touching on this idea of iteration and not just doing the same thing the same way. One of the core values that that we love having is Kaizen. It's this, this philosophy of continuous, never-ending improvement, right? We're never a finished product, and what works now might not work tomorrow. So we're always looking to iterate and experiment and try things out. So it's something we do in our business. It's something we encourage our members to do. You and I could talk, a full show just around, MVPs and how to take, what your little idea is and see if there's really a business there. And sometimes the answer is no, but when the answer is yes, often that little idea you had, you can very quickly and cheaply see if you've got a real business. And sometimes that eclipses the business you're in right now. So we encourage our members to do that kind of stuff all the time. And it's led to some really cool product launches and new business launches.
Nice. So in understanding the concept of what you've created, it seems like worthwhile for people to be part of something as important as what you're doing, because it not only lets them bounce ideas off, but it lets them bounce ideas and before you even invest any finances into it, because wow, is that cheaper? I recently heard of somebody who can actually virtually create a machine before they build it. Because in the past, you had to build a machine and then see if it worked. And if it didn't work, you had to take it apart. What's broken? What's this? What's that? So the technology has allowed us to really revamp the way we do business entirely. Imagine in any business, if you can put it through a virtual or an AI, and you can say, is this viable? Will this work? How many clients can I get out of this? Or will this even sustain not only for the first year, but 10 years from now? And I think that a mastermind definitely helps to navigate those waters. When it comes to business, it's important to listen to everything out there, but then also to make sure that when you catch in your net, you're not going to catch the best fish. You're going to have to throw some back. They're too small. You got junk in there. You got some that like, they're ill. So you have to really, when you throw that net out there, you really have to look and peel through, just like they do in any assembly line, right? You see it, right? Especially if you saw the Lucy show where she's eating all the chocolate. But consider, I might as well eat the bad ones, and there's so many bad ones.
Good, important quality control.
Yeah, total quality control. But I think that's a great way for any business to, before they put out a product, it's to have, and that's why businesses spend millions of dollars to have people come in and taste their food, or people come in and try their product in order to see if it's gonna be something worth.
And the earlier on in that development process you can do that, the faster you can iterate, and the faster you can, decide not to do something if it doesn't make sense. When I look back at one of my companies I launched about 14-ish, almost 15 years ago now, I was in a very high-end exclusive mastermind group setting, saw a gap in my own business that I wanted filled and couldn't find the solution for it. And so an idea came up on how to fill that. And it was just an idea here. And so I threw together like a few quick slides outlining what my idea was. And just in conversations with other members, ask the question, like, here's the problem I see. Here's how I'm thinking of solving this. If I built this kind of thing, like, is this a gap you have in your business too? And I had, 3 people in the small room say to me, yes, if you build that for yourself, I want it too. How do I get access? So I knew just from a back of the napkin, idea, that the idea had legs, that I was worth pursuing a little bit. So I was able to then go forward and flush the idea out more and get buy-in again, and then launch a really basic MVP version of that. And then test that out and have them start using it in their business and getting feedback before there was revenue generated, before all the rest of the stuff was set up. And so then we decided to actually launch that business. Those early, beta testers, as it were, on the same day, all became paying customers. And the same day that we took on expenses to run that business was the same day we had revenue coming in from our initial customers. And then we were able to launch it and bring in new customers as well. And so we were able to incrementally test that idea. And I have a ton more stories that, along those lines of how you incrementally test an idea and get that early feedback, so you can course correct earlier and throw the fish out, that aren't a good fit, right? So that you do end up with the product that the customers want, who they're telling you with real dollars that you're creating the thing they want versus not.
I love the story of somebody who invents something and they ask their friends, wow, would you buy this? And their friends, absolutely. And then you go and say, okay, here it is. Buy it now. Oh no, I it's a great idea. I just can't afford it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, so that's why it's important to have people who are in the same boat as you, fishing with you.
Well, we're not always our own customer.
Correct.
However, dollars speak, right? The gap from $0 to 1 penny is enormous, right? 1 penny to $1 to $1,000 and on, not that much of an incremental step. But even a penny is now a transaction, is someone validating an idea with money and saying it's worth something beyond nothing. If you remember Tim Ferriss, forever back, when he was launching his book, was looking for what title to use. And so he ran ads for 4 different titles to see what would sell. Now, it'd be easy to look at which one gets more clicks. But a click isn't really a vote. He let people then pre-order the book and actually buy the book with that title. So now people were voting with their actual dollars on which book title resonated, made the most sense. And so they looked at which one sold the most, got rid of the other 3 ideas, and told, all those buyers that, yeah, the book's coming out, but we changed the name, right? So when you're able to actually test something out and your measure of success is who actually buys it, that means way more than a focus group or asking friends or just doing a survey, right? It's okay to do those things, but what you're really looking for is who's going to transact and actually purchase your idea as early on in that process as possible.
Listen, Jeremy, I got to tell you, I love the way you think. I love the ideas, the concepts, and I love the fact that you have built this thing where you're helping people, but in the process, you're helping yourself, which is a beautiful thing. If you don't mind, let me share with you one of the things that I'm doing. I have an event, and I told you earlier, coming up in November, and let me share this with you.
Welcome to Speaking Prowess, where we believe in the power of communication to transform lives. If you're ready to take your communication skills to the next level, we have a lineup of some of the most influential communication experts in the industry. These are the voices that will guide you on a journey to enhance your ability to connect, influence, and succeed. At Speaking Prowess, our mission is clear: to empower you through effective communication. We know that mastering the art of communication isn't just about what you say. It's about how you say it and the impact it has on every aspect of your life. So take action now and get ready to embark on a journey towards personal and professional growth.
So that's what's happening November 22nd through the 24th And on the bottom of the screen is where you can actually go and take a look and sign up and come join us. When we can consider business today compared to 10 years from today, 10 years ago, if I should say correctly, what's the one thing that you've seen that has helped or even hurt?
Yeah, if we zoom out, and I see 10 years is in the middle of that area. One thing I think that we're so fortunate to have today, more than 10 years ago and more than 100 years ago, is the ability to test something out with so little and iterate so early on. If you rewind earlier, you were talking about being able to design machines virtually, right? These days we can design molecules and proteins virtually, right? We can create medicines virtually. It's incredible what we can do from now, and just imagine 10 years from now, right? But with a business idea, you used to have to go and build a widget and build a machine and scale up manufacturing just to show someone the idea of what you have. And now that we're so much more in the knowledge economy with software and training and information, all these kinds of things, you can iterate and test and ship an MVP so much sooner and so much earlier. And so I encourage our listeners, if you have that idea, right, figure out what is the smallest kernel of that can deliver value to someone, and see if you can sell that. Then you can build on that and increase the value and increase the audience and incrementally ratchet this up. And you'll make mistakes along the way, and that's okay, right? But it's better to fail fast and recover from that failure quickly than it is to try and avoid it and create the perfect idea without ever testing it out in the marketplace.
Oh, yeah. Beautifully said. I got to tell you, thank you for today. I not only did I get to know a little bit about you, but I'd love to continue this conversation, have you come on my other shows as well. And I'd love for you to join us in New York. And everybody listening, do me a favor, follow Jeremy. Go to baymastermind.com, right? And when you think of business, think of not only today, but tomorrow. What does your business look like tomorrow? What does it look like 10 years from now? How will you be? Where will you be? And how will your business impact the world? And the world can be just your small community or your large community, or it can go deeper than that. So thank you for today, Jeremy. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. This is great. A lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have yourself an exceptional rest of the day. Take care, everybody.